And thank you for joining us for the Board of County Commissioners Board work session. This morning, we're going to be talking about transportation impact fee study update and an annual report. This is July 15th, 2020. I am Commissioner John Hutchings, the chair of the board, and we have Commissioner Vice Chair, Commissioner Ty Menser on as well, chimed in Zoom. We have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and let me see who else. I see the Public Works Director, Jennifer Walker.
Commissioner Edwards are here in the room, board room.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards is on board now. And Ramiro, will you introduce people I don't see on my screen, please?
I see Scott Lindblom and Matt Anselman. I see Jennifer Walker. I see Todd Manson. I see Robin Campbell. I see Taylor Am. I don't know what that is, but who that is. But anyways, that's what I have.
Thank you. Just like romper room.
I was going to say that was very romper roomish.
Just romper roomish, yeah. Happy birthday, everybody. So we're going to go ahead. If you want to join this meeting via conference call to listen, the phone number is 360-252-9020, and the PIN is 1234. So you're welcome to join in and listen, but not join the conversation. So with that, I'm going to start with Ramiro to kind of frame this. Because no decisions are needed today, is it? Oh yeah, decision needed.
No, but not necessarily today. We'll bring that decision at a later date, if you feel comfortable. And this is a follow-up to the briefing that you received in mid-June. And there was a few questions, and I believe the department is ready to answer those questions and go from there. Also related to this briefing, you received a letter from the Olympia Master Builders Association, and that is related to this briefing, which is the traffic impact fee briefing, and the follow-up briefing, which is the parks impact fees. And the letter from the Olympia Master Builders Associations, they provided comments on both. So that should be part of this conversation this morning as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to give it to Jennifer now?
Whomever from Public Works is going to take over.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. This will actually be Scott Lindblom, whom I'm coining as Mr. Transportation. So Scott will be taking the lead on this. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Scott Lindblom, County Engineer with Public Works. Thank you for your time this morning. As the County Manager mentioned, this is a follow-up to our June 10th, 2020 briefing in which we presented the Transportation Impact Fee Update Rate Study completed by our consultant. And in addition, we presented the Annual Traffic Impact Fee Report. So today what we'd like to do is just kind of do a brief recap of that briefing on June 10th. And part of the outcome of that briefing we had in June was providing some additional information that the commissioners requested, which we'll go through here in just a few minutes. Finally, we will be looking for your direction today. Again, looking for your direction today, whether you choose to make a decision at some point in the future, that's certainly your call, but we'll present those options for your consideration this morning. So with that, you may recall in our June briefing, we did go through the draft impact fee study. This study has not been finalized yet, but we started this study in 2019. And the outcome of that was a legally defensible legally maximum defensible rate that the county could charge for impact fees. The prior study we had was completed in 2012, and in 2013 was the first time we began collecting traffic impact fees. To date, we've already spent over $700,000 of impact fees that have been used to fund a couple of key projects. Johnson Point and Hawks Prairie, we've been using that money, and we actually used that money successfully to leverage for some grants we just recently received late last week. We've been using that money for the Yelm Meridian intersection project. We've used traffic impact fee money for the Old 99 and Tilly intersection project. And over the next 3 years, so actually 2020 to 2022, we have programmed over $6 million of traffic impact fee money to fund ongoing and some future projects. These impact fees are really critical to the success of our program, and they help, in a sense, we use that money along with county road fund money as match to leverage that money for some what can be some really wonderful grants. Often we use the impact fees to to perform a preliminary design, which gets us to a good place in a project delivery process where we know what the costs are going to be, we know what the project will be, and then we've been quite successful getting those grants, as I mentioned. At the June 10th briefing, at the conclusion of that, we did present 3 options for the board's consideration. The first option was to assess traffic impact fees at the maximum defensible rate. The outcome of that would be about an average impact fee of $6,700 per new single-family home. And I should, as a refresher, I should note that impact fees are only assessed on new development, not on existing development. So that was the first option, the 100% of the maximum defensible rate. The second option we presented was a 50% rate reduction. So taking that maximum rate and really cutting it in half. This is the same protocol that we're doing now for our traffic impact fees. And if that were to be assessed, the average fee rate would be about $3,350 per new single-family home. And certainly we presented the board another option that if the board chose to take a different direction, perhaps a different percent rate reduction or really anything of their choosing, that's certainly the board's discretion at which to do that. And finally, as required by county code, we did present the annual traffic impact fee report, and that was at the conclusion of that briefing. So when we were completed, when staff presented that briefing in June 10th, the board asked us to come back, which we're doing here today, to provide a little bit more information on how the projects on our traffic impact fee were selected. There are 39 projects on that list, and certainly the board asked a great question about, well, where did we come up with those projects? And so that's what we're here to talk about today. So as I mentioned, there are 39 projects on our list, and we call it the 20-year project list. And for simplicity's sake, what we did is divided those 39 projects into 3 distinct groups to really help frame the discussion. The first group we call the capacity-driven projects. The second group was our priority projects that were perhaps driven by other issues that are not related to traffic. Some of those could be rural road upgrades, safety projects, preservation projects. And often if we use those projects in the 20-year project list, we have to be adding capacity to our road system. So for instance, if we did a safety project that added guardrail, that would not be eligible because a guardrail does not add any capacity to a road. However, if we put a roundabout in, or if we added a turn lane or widen the road with added shoulders, the part of that project that would be eligible to spend traffic impact fees on would be that, say, the extra widening or a turn lane. Finally, the last group we lumped together are those completed projects. And the Growth Management Act does allow us to use traffic impact fees on projects that were already completed, provided that those completed projects did add some capacity to the road system. And we've got examples of each of these we'd like to walk through. For the sake of your time, we don't anticipate walking through all 39 projects, but if that is your choice, we are happy to do that. But what we did is looked at all the projects countywide, and they're presented here on a map. And the intent of this map is not necessarily to show where or to go into detail on any one of the projects here, but really to show that these traffic impact fee projects are all over the county. They're in the Grand Mound area, the urban area, the rural area, and really everywhere in between. Now, capacity-driven projects come from our regional transportation model that is run by Thurston Regional Planning. And it's the model considers traffic growth, land use changes, and also trying to predict the future in the sense where growth will happen, where traffic patterns change. The model identifies that area or those intersections that are at capacity now or expected to exceed capacity by the year 2045. Now, it's important that this model and our traffic impact fees are updated on a regular basis because things do change. It is a crystal ball that we're using with a traffic model, and the model needs to be tweaked as more people come to the area, growth patterns change, as I mentioned, but it's really important that the model is as accurate as it can be, but certainly understanding that it is a model. I'd like to provide just a really great example of how important it is to make these changes, because when we last ran the model in 2015, we used that model as the basis for our traffic impact fee report that we started to work on last year and presented to you last month. In that model, the model run found that the intersection of Cooper Point and Kaiser Road was going to be exceeding capacity within that time period. And because of that, it was added to our 39 project list that we'll be going over here in just a moment. When the Thurston Regional Planning Council adopted the new updated plan last Friday, it used a model that was completed in 2018, which is the most current model. That current model and the current plan did not have Cooper Point and Kaiser intersection in the as a failing intersection. So consequently, what staff will be doing is going through the newly adopted plan, going through our project list and comparing the two and making sure that all of our projects on the list are in the most current plan that was just adopted last Friday. So an outcome of that will be the Cooper Point and Kaiser intersection will be coming off that list. So what that means is the cost for that project in our 20-year list will be removed. And consequently, I think it will have an effect on the traffic impact fee rates. However, I don't expect that rate will be, it will probably be measurable, but not significant. But,
Sir, I have a question.
yeah, was there a question, Commissioner?
No, that was clapping. See, that was the project I kept telling you. There's no need for a roundabout at Cooper Point and Kaiser, and it turned out I was right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So good call. So as I mentioned, we'll be going through that list and making sure that the projects are all either on that list or on a or identified in the plan. So if I go to the next page here, this is the start of our capacity-driven project list. This is the biggest chunk of projects we have in those three groups. As I mentioned, the Cooper Point and Kaiser, which we'll get to in a moment, that will be struck from this list, and the project costs will be removed. One of the other projects I'd like to touch on that you may be familiar with already is the Marvin Road and Pacific Avenue. This is an area that right now we have some concurrency issues going on now, and we are working toward making those improvements and getting all the funding in line to address that, to free up development in that area. We've had some success essentially selling trips, which is kind of a part of a bigger discussion, but I guess the takeaway is that we are actively working toward improvements on that corridor, and by 2024, I believe, we have to have all the improvements done, or we have to have development have the improvements done to really free up that corridor to remove the concurrency issues. Johnson Point and Hawks Prairie Road intersection, that is another project I'm sure you've heard about, and actually I mentioned that one yesterday, because this is a classic example of where we did use traffic impact fee money to get the design going on a project, which put us in a great position to apply for and receive, in that case, in this case, about $3 million of STP money for right-of-way and construction. So again, a great example of how these fees are so critical to the success of our program. And Cooper Point and Kaiser, I just mentioned, will be taken off, and that is shown up on, it's not on that page there, it's I think on the next. So there it is. So those are the capacity-driven projects, and I'd just like to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions on how those projects are chosen. Hoping I can't see people here. Okay. So I'd like to move on to I guess we'll call them the other projects, the other priority projects. And as I mentioned a moment ago, to be on this list, all these projects have to have some element of adding capacity to the road system. So, well, a project, well, I guess I gotta get on my right page. Well, a project may be a safety-driven project, or a preservation project, like the very first one, the Yelm Highway Southeast from the railroad tracks, which is right by the Amtrak station, east to Meridian Road. That's a preservation-driven project, but because it adds an element of capacity, that part of the project that adds capacity is eligible for traffic impact fees. Lower on down on that same page, on the bottom of the page, the Little Rock Road Southwest and from 113th Avenue to 110th Avenue. Again, that is not a capacity-driven project. It's on our list because it is a safety and a bridge project. That is a bridge that some of you may recall is similar in design to the L4 bridge, which broke in 2014. So we did also use traffic impact fee money on this project and use that to leverage, in that case, $1.8 million of money through TRPC that was just awarded last Friday. So this project will be adding a turn lane, lighting, and actually replacing that bridge with a slight realignment of 113th Avenue. So again, it's that part of the project that adds capacity that allows it to be eligible for traffic impact fees. Any questions on the other priority projects? I have to look down at the group there. Okay. So finally, the third group is the completed projects. Again, these are all projects that have been completed and they added capacity. So we've had some projects in the past that, again, added no capacity. None of these are on the list. But I'm going to just call out two of them. The Carpenter Road Northeast from Martin Way to Martin Way. Let's see, I'm looking at the screen here. So that was a project that we are paying back with impact fees, paying back the money we spent on there that added capacity along the same lines of the Yelm Highway Southeast capacity project. So again, those projects added capacity. We can use through allowed by GMA impact fee money to pay back the road fund for that part of the project that added capacity. So that's how we lumped all the 39 projects together. And Commissioner Menzer, again, you'll be happy to know there will be 38 here shortly. But we lumped those together to look at, again, those projects that were capacity driven, other projects that were not necessarily capacity driven, but did add capacity. And again, those projects that were already completed that were paying back the road fund, provided those projects added capacity to the road system when they were built. So moving on, what we have are three options for your consideration. And before I get into that a little bit, I just want to highlight again the importance of these traffic impact fees for our program. They're really key to the success of putting us in a great position to leverage money for grants. And I think our team has been very, very successful doing that. But we also recognize that impact fees are paid on new development as it happens. And the fees, some might say that they are a burden to folks. However, it's really a user fee. You could look at it in that sense. So as people come to the area, they're really paying their proportionate cost for use of the existing road system. So the options that we presented, again, these are essentially the same ones we did last month, but to look at the no reduction in the rate, which is, again, that's we call the maximum defensible rate. That would result in the highest cost per single family house. That is certainly an option for your consideration. That is not the path that we've been on since 2013. The path we've been on since 2013 is the 50% rate reduction. So again, that's the maximum rate we could apply, but then 50% of that. Again, that's the rate we're currently using. And as the county manager did mention, your office, and I received a copy of the letter provided by the Olympia Master Builders. That letter was in response to us sending them the draft impact fee study. And I had a chance to talk to the Olympia Master Builders on a few occasions. And their letter, as the county manager may have mentioned, did provide their input on the study. And really what the Olympia Master Builders provided was something that is consistent with option number 2 presented above. They supported adopting a fee increase that's less than the maximum rate. So again, that maximum rate is number 1, but they supported a rate that was less than the maximum rate. And as they said, ideally a 50% reduction of that maximum. They also understand that the community's been hit hard by the coronavirus epidemic right now. And they offered a strategy that would implement the rate increase, as they put it, 20 months after the county has fully entered phase 4 to reduce the impact on the development community. So we looked at what impact that would have to delay implementation of the rates, and certainly that's an option that the board has. Were we to delay implementation of these traffic impact fees for a period of 12 months, the difference in revenue collected would be projected to be about $220,000. So in the big scheme of things for our program, that's certainly what we believe is a very comfortable approach for us. While it would have an impact on the program, I think it's an impact that we can certainly work through in light of the COVID epidemic we're all going through right now. And finally, the board always has the option to provide staff a different direction on either how to update the impact fee rates or whether to update the impact fee rates. What we presented was 100% of the rate or 50%, but it's the board's option on whether to choose really 0 to 100%. What we've been doing since 2013 is collecting fees at a 50% reduction of the maximum defensible rate. And with that, I would love to turn it over for questions. Looking at my screen there.
All right, Commissioner Menser, go ahead, sir.
Scott, I was just reviewing my notes from the briefing on June 10th, and I was inclined, even before seeing the Master Builders letter, I was inclined to go with the 50%. And part of what I had in my notes about that related to keeping us in line with the other jurisdictions, and you didn't touch on that this morning, so I was wondering if you could refresh our memories about that, because I think that's at least an important consideration when you've got the rural versus the urban, and what other jurisdictions are charging for the same.
Yeah, you bet. That's a great comment. We are pulling up the comparison of, let's see, it's slide 17. Here we go. This is how the Thurston County compares with the neighboring jurisdictions. Right now, the big anomaly there is Kitsap County. And as you may recall, Kitsap County is just embarking on a process to update their fees right now. So look at Kitsap County, but certainly take into account that in a 12-month or a 24-month period of time, that number will most likely be quite a bit higher. But if you look at the local jurisdictions, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater, the average rate, if the board chose to pursue a 50% reduction, the average rate is let's see, I think you're on the right slide there, are you? If you look at, should be a slide that shows the maximum rate and the 50% reduction. Well, I can just walk through with you. There we go. So this is a comparison to our neighbors, and if you look at the 50% reduction, that is at or just about slightly higher than Olympia and Tumwater, and a couple $1,000s above Lacey. Now, again, with the maximum defensible rate, that would be the county rate would be quite a bit higher than that. Now, one thing to keep in mind too is the rates do change throughout the county. They're not the same. So when we look at the average rate countywide of just over $3,000, that rate is different in different parts of the county. And so what you see here is the average rate. So that's probably the easiest way to compare it to our neighboring cities and counties. So, and I think that's, Commissioner, I think that's what you were really looking for. Is that right?
Yeah, this slide was, I thought, relevant. And I mean, you know, the whole theory of growth management is that having more rural development it creates greater infrastructure costs. So it's not surprising that we would be a little bit above, but to go to the maximum defensible it seemed to me would kind of put us pretty far out of whack. So that's why I was thinking that your proposal, as I recall, it was kind of the staff's recommendation to kind of do the adjustment along the 50% line that we've been going, and that made sense to me for all those reasons.
Other questions?
Commissioner Edwards, you have anything?
Yes.
Go ahead then, please. I've got a few too.
So are we talking now, are we going to be talking about the projected increase, or are we collecting right now the maximum defensible?
Right now, we are collecting the 50% reduction rate. So if the board chose to implement these fees, the methodology that we're using to find rates is the exact same thing we've been doing since 2013. The reason it will change, or that the fees will change throughout the county, is that the project list will change and costs have changed. So, and some projects have been added, some have been dropped. So, but the methodology is consistent with what we've been doing since 2013.
My concern is that, I don't know, either the sky is falling or it's not. And we're being told it is in some portions of our activities, and we're told it's not in other portions. So I don't have that all figured out, but I still don't think now is any time to increase. That's kind of where I'm at. And it looks like if we stay the course, then on this chart that you've got up, I don't know, I'm looking at a page number, the one that's up on the screen now, we're just going to stay where we are. Is that basically, if we didn't take any action?
Yeah, if no action was taken, the fees would remain in place the way they are right now, yes.
And are the master builders proposing that the fees we have in place now also be delayed for another 20 months? Is that the way you read it?
The way I read their letter was supporting the change in the impact fees consistent with option 2 that was presented. But what they offered was a strategy that would delay implementation of those. I believe they said until 20 months after the county entered phase 4 of the COVID pandemic response, or epidemic, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just not sure that, I don't know why we have to make that decision now and then delay it. That's what I'm wondering about. I'd like to just keep things the way they are until we get farther down the road. Is there a time element involved that prevents us from doing that?
It's certainly your choice to do that. I think the longer duration between updates, it may. I guess our modeling assumptions that we used in the current rates would be less valid, and perhaps they would be at risk to being challenged as we move on in the future. An option the board does have is to adopt the current rates, but then put those into effect at some point in the future, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, or some other time.
Hey,
But that's certainly the board's option as to when to implement these rates.
hey, Scott,
Uh-huh.
can you elaborate the relationship between the current rates and the current list of projects versus the proposed list of projects in comparison to the proposed 50% rate? Because I think it's important for the board to have a clear understanding that the project list needs to be updated. And as a result, the cost estimates needs to be updated. And even if we maintain the same formula, some of the rates will have to increase because of the cost of the projects.
Yeah, do we have a list of the changes to the projects?
No, but we could definitely make one available.
Yeah, and the county manager really brings up a good point, is that as I mentioned, the Cooper Point and Kaiser is just one example of where the modeling does change and projects are added. So inflation happens and costs go up as projects come on our list, and the costs will, as time goes on without an update, the cost will continue to vary from what the assumptions were back the last time we did the update on the impact fees. So the modeling and the impact fees will really, in a sense, be less valid. And that can be a concern as we go on and people get assessed the impact fees. So, like all things, it's good to have the best information we have available and use that to make good decisions. What we have in front of us really reflects the best and latest information we have, whether it's the projects that are on the list, the costs that have been included. And so the further time goes on without this update or this perhaps course correction, I guess the more out of sync we're going to be with what's happening on the ground.
Let me provide another example. Is on the previous project list, we had a couple projects on Henderson Road. Well, the Tumwater through annexations has taken over Henderson Road, so those projects have been removed from the list. So it's important to make sure that the projects on the list and the rates are really based upon a current project list. Otherwise, we're not going to keep pace with development.
And that is a good point, Matt, at least from my perspective, because even if the rates don't increase at this point, it will be very difficult to justify charging rates for a project that is no longer needed. And I believe that is probably, Scott was trying to say, perhaps somebody may challenge that, because we will not have a valid argument in the county to charge fees based on a project that has disappeared from our list, or will not, or would have no intention to build it.
And I think Matt's example is a really good one, because somebody could very easily challenge us for charging fees for the Henderson Road Bridge, even though that's within the city of Tumwater. And then at that time, Tumwater may be charging for that same bridge or same project as well.
That's an excellent point. Scott, I don't know where to begin, so I'm just going to jump, but I'm going to be all over the map here, probably. I'm not in favor. I've said this many times before. When your house is on fire, that's the worst time to remodel. And so here we are, our economy is on fire, and we don't know when it's going to tank even further, if it does, or may not. We just don't know. And I don't have a Ouija board like others seem to. So I'm not in favor of any new fees. or increase fees. At the same time, we're trying to draw and attract more people to Thurston County, into rural Thurston County, and they may be coming that way because Thurston County still is a real viable place where people want to live, work, and play. So I'm going to start with, when I look at that comparison to neighbors that you have on the screen there, and the far right is Thurston County, just above that line. If we chose to do nothing, where would Thurston County be? Is this the far right? Is that showing with the 50%?
Yes, that's the 50% reduction.
So where would we be if we chose to do nothing now?
Let's see. Matt's bringing up the screen right here.
I don't want to deter people from coming to Thurston County to build a home.
Oh, you know where it's gonna be here.
Yeah, there's one that shows.
So currently, so we would go from 3650 to 3350.
Yeah, but where would we be on the map with our comps, our comparable?
30.
So if you look at that map, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
That's right, so am I. Yep, you were just there. So are we below the line or how far below?
So we would be slightly above the line.
Okay, all right.
So when you look at the average rates, the countywide average doesn't change significantly. It's the projects by area there's more of a difference.
So a good example, Commissioner Hutchins, would be that for a house built in Thurston County, the difference would be $300.
Okay. And I can see where it makes a lot of sense to compare with Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and such, but I don't much care about King or Snohomish County or Pierce, because we are the capital county. We have the seat of government right here. And for example, Olympia's population roughly 50,000 people, and pre-COVID and post-COVID, between Monday and Friday, 8 to 5, it doubles. It goes about 80 to 95,000 people when all the state workers come into town. So their philosophy, even per the TRPC meeting last Friday, Olympia traffic had a presentation on a road build, and he said the philosophy is, we'll build a road, but we don't want to expand it. We'll just build another road. And I'm oversimplifying it. And this is regarding the LBA extension from Log Cabin over to 37th. But I don't know if, I'm sure we've looked at other options here. But we are talking rural versus city and urban. And so, for example, I guess a good example is Lily Road in Pacific. Lily Road going north up to Martin Way, up to the hospital. Traffic engineers or traffic studies, and I don't understand this, you guys will, you and Matt will, and perhaps Romero. It made more sense to make northbound to the hospital a one-lane street northbound to the hospital and all the medical facilities, and 2 lanes southbound getting out. But it seems to me more people are trying to get to the hospital in an emergency, and now they have 1 lane versus trying to escape the hospital where they have 2 lanes. With left turns in there, which is a real pain. So I don't follow some of the traffic studies. I don't know what Thurston County's philosophy is, and I might know the answer to this question. That is, who determines Thurston County's philosophy, whether it be building roads and how to build them, where to build them, and how wide? Is that set by the board? Is set by just impact or traffic studies? That's a basic question. Can you answer that, and I'll get on with some of the other ones that I have.
So if I understand your question correctly, I think
I'm all over the map.
No. Are you trying to understand better how the projects are selected and how we decide whether we do a road widening or just a road improvement, or did I capture that right?
You captured it perfectly, much better than I spit it out.
Okay. So when we look at our regional transportation model, that identifies really the problem areas, or the problem intersections, the problem sections of road. Then it's up to us as transportation folks to figure out, all right, we've got this problem here. The intersection is failing. What's the best way to address that congestion area? Is it adding a turn lane? Is it adding a roundabout or perhaps a traffic signal? Once we figure out what's the best way to do that, then we develop some project cost. And then once we have the preferred solution, the project cost, then that goes on the 38 project list. And again, those projects that address capacity primarily are driven by looking at the regional transportation model. So we're not looking at just Thurston County, but it's important to look at how the traffic changes or moves between the county and the different cities and back into the county. So that the model takes that into account and again, identifies those problems. Then it's up to us to figure out what's the solution, what's the best solution for each of those different intersections. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
But wouldn't you,
I will just kind of go ahead, Robin.
I was just going to say though, who chooses the projects to get funded, who sets the philosophy? That's the Board of County Commissioners.
Right,
Yeah.
and I knew that part. Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Hutchins, can I add something to what Scott said?
Yeah.
I'll put it in terms of an example so when we're looking at the county infrastructure system, especially being a county, we're a rural county and we're not always looking to add travel lanes, especially in the rural parts of the county. So I'll give you an example. Say like Old Highway 99 between Grand Mound and Tenina. So one methodology might be, let's add through lanes. Let's have two lanes going in each direction. Whereas the county will look at the model and we'll say, well, maybe we can make improvements to just a few intersections along that corridor to address the capacity rather than adding a bunch of travel lanes. So it's really a balancing act. We're trying to right size the project. So really sometimes it's a collaborative effort between the county engineer, TRPC, or even the other local jurisdictions who have UGAs.
And I guess a great example of that too, on that same corridor is we are looking at an intersection project at Old 99 and Tilly, which in part addresses that very issue that Matt brings up. One option would be to just add lanes for a couple miles, but it's far cheaper for us to add an intersection at that one location.
Yeah, those are very good answers, and thank you for that, Matt. I appreciate that. So now I'm looking at again with the philosophy of not adding any burden to anybody, because I still want to attract residents to Thurston County, rural Thurston County, and even business to rural Thurston County, which will impact our roads. But I just wonder, as OMB asked the question, is this the right time? They want to wait 20 months, which is at the end of 20 months beyond COVID-4, or when we enter phase 4. And entering the phase 4 could be at least a year and a half away. I don't see it any sooner than a year rather. And even our economy bouncing back. But again, I don't project always very accurately. I rely on experts to do that for me. But that might be too long, waiting 20 months. And so if we're going to approve anything, we have to have the capacity to do it. But we also have to lean on the people, real estaters and builders, to be able to afford that. And we can't do that if we're making it too steep. And I'm not making a decision, but I don't care for option 1 at all, the maximum defensible. So I'm looking at either option 2, 50% reduction, or even do nothing at this point in time if we're talking putting it off for some time to increase the fees, especially one that it doesn't take a public hearing and it doesn't take a vote. We just institute it. And so I know I read the letter a few times from Olympia Master Builders, and with respect to them, they bring up some excellent points. So I'm just not convinced one way or the other whether I should go option 2 or 3 just yet. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Edwards here. I'm kind of inclined to go along with what Commissioner Hutchings just laid out, that we're dealing with an unknown. That's kind of our new reality. And I don't think we ought to make any changes yet.
Okay, go ahead, Ty. And then Rob.
I thought when I came in supporting the Olympia Master Village proposal, I'd have an easy morning, but it didn't not turning out that way. I just remind you that their letter says, we recommend that the board adopt a fee increase less than the legally allowable maximum, ideally 50% reduction. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the issue is with, it seems that they're far more knee deep in the issues of how these impact their member organizations and contractors than we are. So their ideal scenario is us to adopt number 2 about how long we would delay implementation. You know, I'm willing to go a year out even myself, just kind of tell you where I'm coming from. But I don't think it makes sense to, we've got to update this list, because I agree with what Ramiro and Scott mentioned about the legal, you know, the legal risk of saying that we're charging people based on fees on old projects. Yeah, we have new projects, but if we haven't updated our list and recalibrated our fee methodology, then we can't actually defend ourselves on that, because we didn't, you know, it's not laid out that we have these new projects that replace the projects like that were part of annexations and stuff like that. So I really don't think it behooves us to just do nothing. Anyway.
Robin, if you'll defer to me just for a moment to finish up on what Commissioner Menser just said. Yes, I understand what they're asking, they being OMB in their letter. But, and I know we recall that when they proffered an extension of expiring permits and such, and waiver of fees and such, they wanted that through July. And we said, not only is that a good idea, but we're going to make it better and go through September. So they may be saying, hey, please don't do the maximum defensible, do the 50% and put it off. If we did something better than that, I think that greatly benefits not only the master builders, representing what, 500 or so realtor home builders in our region. But I think it would impact in the positive side, attracting folks to our community and making it easier for them. Robin, go ahead.
I'm just curious. I don't see in the packet I was handed this morning, how do these rates compare to what the current rates are?
Pull up that slide, Scott.
Yeah.
That's our favorite slide.
I think it was on the slide that you just went off, because the current rate, the average for a single family home, the current rate is $3,356. $3,350. Their proposed rate is $3,650. So that's an increase of $300.
Thank you.
Commissioner, or excuse me, Ramiro, the slide we have up in front is, it includes both the average impact fee rate that we've been referring to, because it's far easier to talk about the average. But on this slide, the dark, I guess it's a blue or dark gray on the right are the current rates. And on the left, the orange would be the proposed rate at a 50% reduction. So you can see it changes by area of the county, but when you look at the dashed or the dotted line in the middle, that's the average rate. So the average rate would increase about $550 from the existing rates to the, I guess, option 2 rate, which is the 50% reduction.
But some areas would actually go down because there's not as many projects in that area. Is that the idea? Based on the update.
Yeah, the costs are spread out over a far greater number of developments. So when you look at, say, the northwest area or the south and south UG area, there are far fewer open lots or potential sites to assess impact fees on, and the project costs are not distributed among as many homes, I guess, in this case. But when you go to the UGA, I guess you're getting the bulk discount. So you could look at it on the left, it's high volume, so costs are spread out over a lot of people, but in the more rural areas, the costs are spread out over far fewer people.
Any other questions?
In theory, the board could the board could adopt the new project list and the new methodology and then say, we want to charge 45% of the maximum defensible. And I mean, not that I'm advocating for that, but that's a way to do it and sort of keep the average, countywide average, maybe the same-ish.
Yeah.
But yet get everything updated and.
Yeah, and what will be important to do is make sure that same percentage is applied throughout the county. So you can't do 50% in one area, 60% in another. It's got to be, in the case you presented, Commissioner, 45% across the county, or the case we have here, 50% across the whole county.
And the board would decide then when that would be implemented, whether it be January 1?
Yes, it's certainly your decision when.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards, anything further?
Yeah, I guess one of the things I would comment on is I'm always worried on these type of projections that we're not taking into. The projections are based on past history, and we're dealing with a new reality and a new future, I believe, and that is going to be a substantial flight from the urban core, contrary to what the Growth Management Act proposes to continue on with. And I think that change is going to come whether we work with it or not. And I think this whole virus thing has brought about that change. So many people are going to be working now from home, which is going to be a big change on traffic flow. I just think doing any change right now might be premature.
May I add to that? Are you done, Commissioner?
Yeah, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I would only add that when I look at option 2 in the briefing paper in the decision, the first bullet is less financial impact on 2 developers. And I would much rather scrape my knee than suffer a paper cut. So having a less impact is still an impact nonetheless. Even though it sounds palatable, it's less of a financial impact. It's going to have an impact. Like a fish hook is easy to go in, but when you pull out the fish hook, that's when a lot of the damage is done. I think that's just the right option, the less financial impact, but I just don't think this is the right time either for that. Unless we're in dire straits and needing that money right up front, like right now, we've got to get this thing going, but I don't feel that impending urge or need just yet. Or at least I haven't been convinced of it.
I'd like to make one other point. I don't know how this equates to what we're talking about today, but I see the municipalities as taking a harder hit from an economic position due to this virus situation than Thurston County is, only because we have not had adequate retail outlet in the past to really fund what we needed to do. So I don't know what the other surrounding areas are going to end up doing, but I know their revenue stream, I think they're going to be, using sales tax as an example, they're going to be probably affected twice as bad as we are on that. And I don't know that that's where the revenue comes from, but when you tie it in with everything else, I just don't think this is a good time to make any of the moves.
So I like Commissioner Menser's suggestion, maybe a 40%, and sometime maybe implementing it in the first quarter of 2020 or 2021 rather. But I have to see an actual, just a short list of the top 5 or 6 projects or 7 projects, but the actual safety need, because I'm very pro safety for traffic safety and citizens. And the flow of traffic, of course, but I like that less than 50% and put it off until the first quarter of next year. Messer.
I just want to be clear that I do not support that. And if Commissioner Edwards is right that we're going to have this urban flight and more growth, it means all the more reason why we have to keep up with the infrastructure costs associated with that. So it just makes it all the more critical that we stay in line and stay on track. And we're not, I mean, to me, this is following the master builder's proposal, and it's, we could delay we we could deal with exactly what you guys are talking about by the proposal to delay implementation. So that's as far as I'd want to go, because otherwise we're going to be just falling further behind on road capacity and other infrastructure needs as we grow.
So I don't know if we have time with 4 minutes left to, and I don't think we have to hammer it out this moment right now in time. But even if we were to go a 50% reduction, as OMB is proposing, but rather than put it off 20 months after we enter phase 4, there might be a 3.5 and a 4 point and a 4.2. I mean, who knows what kind of phases we're going to enter. But to do a 50% reduction and implement it sometime in the first or second quarter of 2021, I'm amenable to that. And I think OMB would be happy. I'm not speaking for them or deciding for them. But I think we need more time to discuss this as a board.
Yeah, and one other thing I might throw in there, I know Matt brought up Tilley Road and Old 99 as an example, rather than widen that whole area between the freeway and Tenino, just putting in a turn lane at Tilley Road, you know, way cheaper, probably solves the immediate problem, maybe not the 20-year problem, but still, I think we can make some adjustments and fix some things that need to be fixed as we go along. And then I think as this growth spurt happens, and it's going to continue for a period of time, I don't know, maybe once they get a super for sure vaccine, everybody will settle down possibly, but I really think we're going to have a major flight. And if we would ease up on restrictions so that the master builders could do their job way easier than what we're putting them through now to get that job done, it would encourage that growth. It would enhance revenue. The point of delivery process when a building package is purchased, and say it's a $100,000 package to build a $300,000 home or something, boy, we're going to get a real shot in the arm from that as we promote that growth that's inevitable anyway, and then encourage it here rather than encourage it in creating a new urban core. I just think it's inevitable.
Romero, will you guide us out of this? Because I've got a couple more questions regarding, do we collect the fees up front, or do we collect them at the closure, at financing? But also, do we have sufficient revenue to do some of these projects or not? But we're going to need a follow-up on this one. This is a good topic.
Yeah, it sounds like certainly the board needs additional time to discuss this. The only thing that I can probably put, at least my point of perspective to you is, you know, the more the board gets into picking and choosing, that's my words, on a percentage, the less defensible the actions that you take will be. I think the underlying issue that you have in here, I believe, is the need to update the project list. Because the project list is the basis in which we charge the impact fees. And that's, at least from my point of view, is the risk the county has the longer that we wait in updating the project list. If somebody can challenge as to why we're charging in a specific area a certain fee, whatever that fee it is, based on a project that either was annexed or is no longer needed. As a result, we're not planning to build that project with the fee we have collected. And that seems to be, at least from my point of view, the gap that we need to address. When we need to address the gap, that's a different conversation. But I think at some point the board really needs to consider updating the project list, because the more the board waits on that, the higher the risk will be for a challenge.
All right, before we skate into the next topic of parks and open space, I want to, with all due respect, I want to give the Director of Public Works an opportunity to weigh in on this topic. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
I think that we've had lots of discussions about the current state of our transportation infrastructure, and that we never are going to have enough money to maintain what we have because of the cost of maintaining it. And this is, as we look at the planning piece of it, we are required to plan for the future. And we do that based off of modeling that's done, based off of the information that we have. And then we try to work that plan and then we update it frequently. And so from my perspective, that's what we're doing here. We have new data that's come in that's adjusting the projects and the addressing growth in the future. Whether the board wants to make a decision on the fees that are being charged, the impact fees that are being charged, is a little bit different conversation. But from my perspective, the revenue is needed. And we can certainly look at being able to accommodate a deferral. But the projected growth is happening, and we don't have enough to take care of what we have right now.
That's good information. Thank you. So with that, we'll have more information coming then, and then give good direction.
So if I may, Commissioners, what I hear from the board is that you like another briefing.
I would.
So what?
Sounds like we need more information.
Yeah. So what information do you like? Can you just give us a perspective so we are prepared to bring that information at the next briefing?
Yeah, I'll end with it, but let me start with my seatmates. Commissioner Menster, is there anything more you need?
I really don't. I never want to get in the way of a commissioner wanting more information. So I don't oppose your request, but I pretty much know where I stand, and I don't need any more information on this.
Commissioner Edwards, do you need any more information?
I wouldn't mind hearing just a little bit about mass transit and how it's utilized. And I don't think that we can be criticized too much about being inclined to hit the pause button when it comes to litigation exposure right now. So I'm not in a rush. The transit issue maybe can tell us a little bit more about utilizing mass transit. I'm seeing empty buses running around everywhere. I know the windows are darkened to the point you can't hardly see that anymore, but I'm making a conscious effort to pay attention to that. I think that has a lot to do with public trust, and when we're telling the public our needs and we've got empty buses running around, I think it all ties in. So I think just an overall view of where we're at. We'll get more information about how this virus is affecting revenue, what's the comparison to other municipal jurisdictions, and how we fare. I'm definitely not in a rush or worried about exposure right now. I'm not saying down the road that we don't have to worry about that, but I'd say in a couple of months, I'd like to have a follow-up on this.
All right, and I'm sure stay home, stay safe, or stay safe, stay home has some impact on buses as well, or transit. The information I would like is with our current funding, what can we do? And with additional funding, what more could we do that enhances safety and traffic flow? And then, like Ramiro said, maybe just a shorter, more prioritized list. That just gets me there. I'm almost there anyway. Jennifer, does that help? Head shake is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that there won't be any change to the modeling that's been done and the figures that have all been calculated. So there won't be any change to that. In terms of mass transit, we could certainly look at having a discussion with intercity transit and what information they might be able to provide. Scott, did you want to add something?
Yeah, on the shorter and more prioritized list, the model identifies all the sites that are either at or will be at capacity. So it's going to be, we can try to look at a way, but it'll be tough to prioritize a list when they all show that they will all be areas of concern or areas that we'll need to address. So, and they all have to be capacity driven, so they're not, it could be a safety project that adds capacity, which might be what you're referring to, but I guess I'm not really clear on the shorter list. Are you looking for, I guess, or maybe Jennifer and I can talk afterwards about.
We'll talk about, because I think what we can talk about, I think that's a good point in terms of concurrency and capacity, and maybe we can talk about when an area hits capacity and it's failing concurrency, what the options are as a result of that.
My suggestion was, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ty.
Well, I just wanted to say if there's specific intercity transit numbers that Commissioner Edwards wants, he could write them down. I can get those numbers from the general manager easy. And for example, I'm not riding the bus at all right now because I want to keep capacity for the people that are reliant on it for their job and their medical appointments. So, for example, I would like to have been riding the bus, but just out of respect for my people in the community, I've been not riding it. And I think a lot of people are doing that, people that ride it on a discretionary basis. And that's why you're seeing, because they're still trying to socially distance, physically distance on the buses, even though they're running fixed route.
Go ahead, Romero.
Maybe just to clarify, my suggestion was not to have a reduced list. My suggestion was to update the project list. And I think that's probably what the board may need to consider down the road. What I'm hearing is that perhaps Commissioner Hutchins would like to see a little more in detail what type of capacity projects, what type of safety projects. I think you mentioned on a couple of occasions the safety projects that are included on this list. And maybe at the next briefing, we can probably, staff can concentrate a little more in detail what those safety projects are and what is it they're trying to solve as a result of those projects. Will that work?
That does for me, because the priority of, is it safety or is it capacity? Or is it a mixture of both? And how do we prioritize that?
I would like to just throw out one more thing, kind of for clarification. When I say I think we're premature making some of the decisions now versus a little later. Now you might ask, well, when is a little later? Well, I don't know when we're going to get the information that we need. And I think some of the changes that are coming that we are not considering because it's yet to come, and everything we've got now is based on the old way of doing business. And I think the new way of doing business might boil down to being less travel and more working from home, as long as we supply areas where the infrastructure is in place that these young professionals can work from home. So I think we're going to see a big change in society. I think it's going to be an urban flight, very much like, you've heard me say this before, but Escape from New York or something, a movie made 25 years ago. I'm not going to say it's going to be that bad, but I really think we've got a societal shift going to take place, and it's going to have a dramatic impact on how we plan for these future expansions.
Okay, so as we glide into, or just before we glide into Parks, Open Space, and Trails plan and the park impact fees, let's take a 5-minute break, come back at 10:15 to give staff time to prepare slides and do whatever else you need to do. Thank you. the board briefing presentation on, from Public Works on the Parks and Open Space and Trails Plan, or the POST plan, and Park Impact Fee Study from 2020. And do you want to start, Romero, or are we going right to Jennifer?
This is a follow-up to briefing you received on the same date, I believe was June 10th. And so at this point, I think there were some questions that was generated out of that briefing. And I believe the staff is going to walk you through with some answers, I believe. So Jennifer, I don't know, or Carrie?
Yep. I'll start it. So thank you, Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. I'm going to introduce a couple of other people that we have here. Carrie Hibden, who is our Parks Operation and Maintenance Manager. Karen Weiss, who's our Financial and Asset Management Division Manager. And then we also have Jason Hennessy with Burke Consulting, our resident expert. And then I believe Lucy Mills, Road Operations Manager as well.
Lucy will not be joining us today.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So 2 items, as Romero mentioned, this is a follow-up. The first item is our Parks and Open Space Trail Plan. And so I think the key takeaway, we had presented the plan on June 10th, and it's a fairly lengthy, robust plan. And so we wanted to give the board time to be able to review that. The largest takeaway out of that plan is a reduction in level of service. So the current plan that's in place right now has a level of service, has a goal of 3.5 acres per 1,000 residents. And we are proposing to reduce that to 3 acres per resident, based off of, what we have right now in order to be able to maintain the facilities, input that we got from the community during our outreach. And so that was the largest takeaway. That then sets the stage for conversations about traffic impact fees, but specifically for the Parks and Open Space and Trails Plan, which we call the POST plan. If the plan is acceptable, we would be asking the board for us to be able to move forward to request a AIS for a public hearing for adoption of the POST plan.
I had a quick question on the POST plan.
Oh, go ahead. I'm looking at some other thing. Go ahead, Ty.
This is not very particularly substantive. I thought it was overall really well done. I just had a question on the summary table on page. There's 2 sets of page numbers, so I'm not sure which one. There's 31 in black and there's 10 in green. I guess it's 10 because that's the plan. Maybe that was part of a larger briefing packet. Yeah, so 10, I guess. Page 10 of the plan. There's like a summary chart of all the different facilities. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
My question was just, why is Garin Park listed under regional parks rather than under the undeveloped park site? Since according to the description, it's other than a footpath or something, it's undeveloped. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I can address that. And so Garin Park is currently one of the parks that is being used for foot traffic, as you mentioned. But this summer, we are looking to actually add a couple parking stalls to that and some signage. This is one of the sites that is on the list with RCO, the Recreation and Conservation Office, as one that we are required to open. It's our last park property that we have obligations to open. And so we put that in a regional park as one that is essentially open for use to the public.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Perfect.
You're welcome.
Thumbs up for me on the post plan. That's great.
Gary, do you have any questions?
No, not at this point.
Okay, I have a question, and I'm going to refer back to the July 2nd, 2020 letter from the Olympia Master Builders. In the second paragraph, they talk about park impact fees. Have you had a chance to see that, Jennifer or Carrie?
Yes.
Okay. Is what they're saying makes sense, but is it factual? Not saying that they're being disfactual or spinning it, but I just wonder, is that true that if we adopt a fee increase that's less than the legally allowable maximum? Wait. Where's the parks? Oh, here we go. The third paragraph. I'm sorry. As funding new parks entirely through impact fees without general fund allocations is inherently inequitable. Is that a factual statement?
We are not funding new parks solely through impact fees. We actually aren't able to do that. It has to be a portion of, and funding has to come from, so we actually are using, we're not funding any new parks. We're actually adding capacity to our existing parks, which is one of the strategies that we proposed to the board. I want to say, I can't remember if it was in 2018 or 2019, because we don't have a lot of money for our maintenance and operations. We're struggling with that. We're looking at trying to add capacity to our existing facilities.
Jennifer, this is Karen Weiss. Just to add to that, for any of our capital projects, while we're not funding the other portion through general fund allocations, it is all being funded through REIT 2. So those combination of funds, we are assessing each project and determining what the capacity-driven aspect of that is, or growth-driven aspects, and then funding that appropriately and legally with park impact fees, and then the remainder is REIT.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Jennifer and Karen. And that nuanced me. I saw the funding new parks. I thought, we're not buying new parks. So anyway, thank you for that differentiation. Go ahead.
So the question that we have before the board for consideration, I understand you won't be making a decision now, but we were asking permission to bring forward an AIS for a public hearing for the post plan. So if there aren't any other questions on that.
You know, I could have one question. Maybe you could explain to me a little bit. Is that okay, Hutch?
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned your 3.5 versus 3 per 1,000 citizens or something. And that comparison is having to do with parks and trails. How do you assess trails versus parks? I'm just kind of curious in that equation. I mean, one is you're using acreage, but is there a comparable that you use with mileage on trails or something? I don't see it. It looks like apples and oranges to me.
Jason, are you on the line or available?
Yeah. And I could speak to that too if Jason's not available.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see Jason just popped up.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I understood the question correctly. So the question is whether or not, or what the difference is between the way that you're measuring those two things. Is that?
Yeah. Okay, I say you want to make a reduction, for an example, okay, but how do you equate parks and trails? I mean, they're separate activities. Okay, one is by acreage, I'll say, or square footage, however you want to do it. And trails, what is it, per mile, per 1,000 citizens? Or I just don't get the comparison there.
Sure. Yeah. So trails are typically measured in almost every jurisdiction by mile, partially because each trail may have a different width and different quality.
Sure.
Some are paved. And so and sometimes, depending upon the jurisdiction, they can use transportation funding because trails can actually be part of a transportation system, and the two kind of interweave. As you said, the recreation opportunities are somewhat, or they're different. People go to a trail for one purpose and typically go to a park for different. So that I hope I'm answering your question. The difference in measurement makes sense because of the difference in recreation and just sort of the inherent, like the trails just can be this right of way and quite narrow, and your development opportunities for what you're going to do with it are pretty confined. So the per acre or investment per capita approach for parks in general makes more sense, and then the per mile is a good level of service standard for trails. I feel like I don't know that I actually answered what you're asking.
Okay, maybe you can tell me this. Do we utilize our trails? Are they considered part of our transportation system?
I'm going to look to make sure to Jennifer and Karen and Carrie. I believe not, and that just is each jurisdiction does it differently, and sometimes transportation may pay for the intersection where they come together, like the trail meets up with the mobility plan, the master mobility plan or transportation plan, and so there was at least one project on there that I thought kind of had a shared. Karen, am I? Or Jennifer, I see you shaking your head, so I'm not just making things up. That's good. There was one project that kind of has a shared. They're coupled together, and it's getting a little bit of funding from both sources.
We've got some dedicated county employees that ride their bicycles to work every day, and so I know there's others that do that. So is there a chance that we could have a different funding stream to deal with some of our activities when it comes to trails if we were to put something together that did recognize that transportation was part of our trail system? And I don't know what that would look like, if that would be we allow electric bikes or just pedal bikes, I don't know, go-karts. I know that'd be extreme. You wouldn't want to run over somebody that's walking, but I'm just wondering what it would take to become eligible to have a different funding stream, or become eligible for a funding stream from maybe a grant process, either from the feds or state or whomever, if we did allow it. That's why I'm just wondering about how we compare with others, even if you're going to go by miles versus population, and how do we stand in that regard, where the standard, must have been 3.5 at one point in time on acreage somewhere, the National Parks evaluation program or whatever. I don't know where you get your information, but I'm just curious about, are we getting adequate benefit? Because we've got a pretty good trail system in Thurston County. Could we expand on it possibly? Could that be a goal? Expand the usage maybe, and that would cover what we need to fix up for our population. Because when you start acquiring parks property, then you're starting to get into some pretty complicated stuff. And like the letter says, we don't have the resources, it seems like, to maintain what we have. So I don't know, just a question.
Is there an answer?
Jennifer, would you like me to speak to that, or would you like Karen to speak to the financial part of that, or?
Well, I think, Carrie, you can speak in terms of kind of the plan that we have moving forward with trails and the structure of it. There's still cost associated with maintaining it as we add it as well. But please go ahead.
Sure. We do consider ourselves a recreation and transportation corridor. We're a non-motorized corridor, so that involves any form of motorized transportation. But we do calibrate our trails by acreage in the post plan, because there are acres associated with trails also. And I would offer that means things like our trailhead properties. where we have larger parking lots. And the trail corridors themselves, although the asphalt that you see is 10 feet wide, those trails are typically 100 and in some instances up to 400 feet wide. So you raise a good question, Commissioner. If we are considering our trails, say, 100 to 400 feet wide, that's a lot of acreage, but we're not really using that for active use. We're only using the 10-foot paved asphalt surface. But it is a linear park, if you will, because we're a recreation and transportation corridor. So the recreational aspect really makes a trail system much like a linear park. And so we are using a lot of that acreage. We're using it for the asphalt ribbon that you see, if you will. But we're also using that for preservation. We have a lot of projects that go on out in our trails system that involves adding trees. We go along rivers, lakes, and then again through the urban core. So we have a lot of different activities that take place on the trail that really do address recreation and transportation.
I guess just to follow up on that, then do we really need to lower our acres per thousand or something? Because are we totally including the number of acres? So if you have a trail, you know, that's actually 200 feet wide, so for every 200 feet, you have an acre, you know, and how does that pencil in? And whether we use it or not, I don't see that that is a big issue, because the aesthetics of taking a walk in a nice environment in rural America must be worth something, especially for city folks.
Sure, and it is counted in the overall total acreage of the parks program. We have total acreage and we have total developed acres. And that's what makes up the metric to get us to level of service. And as Jennifer mentioned, the reason we're suggesting lowering 0.5 acres per thousand is based on community input, the available resources that we have for parks, and our existing land base. So we feel that that's a well-considered figure, the 3.0 acres per thousand, considering all three of those things, the amount of property we already have, the resources we have to take care of it, and input that we got from the citizens regarding how they would like to see their parks program progress into the future.
Harry, will you share what our current acres per 1,000 residents is now?
Yeah, we're at 2.9.
So we've been at 2.9 and there was a goal of 3.5. And so because of the lack really of funding, having enough funding for proper maintenance and operations of the facilities, we looked at that and said, well, does it really make sense to have a goal of 3.5 and then continue to have that goal when we don't have the financial means to maintain? Does it make sense to be moving forward and trying to acquire even more property?
But still, it's still a measurement, though, and it's audacious and bold, but it's still a measurement or something to which a goal to try to achieve.
Absolutely.
But I'm hearing if we're at 2.9, sorry to cut you off, Jennifer, if we're at 2.9 now, is what I'm hearing is 3% is the new goal?
3 acres per 1,000
right.
is what is proposed.
3 acres, okay. All right, go ahead, Gary.
No, that's okay.
So what we're looking at is giving guidance to management on the post plan, adopting the post plan that would allow us to receive grant funding, which is always a good thing, especially when we're in the hole in parks, or not in the hole, but not lack of funding. That's the current mission right now, is to whether to approve or not approve the post plan and put it before the board for adoption.
To requesting the board to give the department permission to bring forward an AIS for a public hearing.
So it takes a public hearing to reduce a public policy like whether we're shooting for 3.5 or
No, if I may, that's one element of the plan itself. And reducing the acres or not, think about it in terms of level of service. And that's the policy that you're making, is what level of service you want to provide to your citizens per 1,000 population. With the level of service, is the 2.9 as we have it right now, is that adequate? Perhaps not. Is it 3.5 as Jennifer stated? Is that high level of service that will not be achievable and attainable? But certainly as the population grows and as the need for recreation grows, I believe that 3 acres per 1,000 population is adequate in terms of level of service. So, answer to Commissioner Edwards, this is just one element of the plan itself. But the plan has other criteria as to how we need to move forward as a county to provide recreation services to our citizens. And the citizens need to provide you their perspective by reviewing this plan via public hearing.
Okay. Are we, as part of our criteria in making this decision, are we basing it on unincorporated population only, or total county population?
This is just unincorporated.
Okay.
What? Say that again.
Unincorporated.
So it's, what is our unincorporated, like 160,000 or something? Is that what we are?
Just about that, yeah.
So
each city has their own parks.
yeah, right.
Permits.
So we're doing everything based on that figure, whatever it is. The new census will be out here before long, but let's just say 160,000. I don't know. Just
All right, so are you ready to give
curious.
a thumbs up or down, give direction?
But we do have, Carrie, we do have parks within the cities. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. No?
Mm-hmm. Well, part of the trail, yes, goes
Yeah.
through the city.
Yes, we do. And we have some other parks that are in the urban growth areas for some of the cities.
Right.
Yeah. So you want direction? I'll give you direction.
So what I'm hearing is that ask the staff to go ahead and bring an AIS for you to consider setting a public hearing.
Yeah, that way we get it going for a public hearing, and we get to get a measurement from the citizens, what's important to them.
And I believe that is important for you to hear from the public.
And is this
Absolutely.
considering a rate increase as well?
No, the rate increase is a different step. This is just for you to consider adopting the plan itself.
Oh, okay, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ty.
Just a question for Jennifer. Because folks may get confused, and I want to make sure I'm clear. You're using level of service in this context to mean the number of acres per citizen. We've also had discussions about parks. I think a different usage of the term level of service, about how often we clean the bathrooms and how often we do the landscaping and stuff. And that's a completely different. And when you started out level of service, I was kind of thinking one, and now I realize that they're very, very different. But I want to make sure the public's clear about that.
Yes, thank you. That is a good point, Commissioner. We're talking about at a higher level, a policy level, level of service. And so similar as you were talking about the prior briefing with transportation, and Commissioner Hutchings asked, who sets the policy? It's the board that sets that, and that's done through the capital facilities plan, which is a part of the comprehensive plan, where you're laying out at that high level what your level of service is. So when we go back to transportation and we talk about concurrency and level of service, we're talking about how much congestion is acceptable. What is that level of service? When we're talking about parks, we're identifying it as acres per 1,000 residents at that higher level.
I just want folks to realize that part of the calculation as to how much level of service in terms of acreage we would want is how much level of service of cleanliness and maintenance we can provide, and those two interrelate. If it was just a matter of acquiring parkland, I would not support any reduction. But when you factor in the financing and the impact fee limitations and what the county budget looks like, et cetera, and what kind of level of service, doesn't make sense to acquire parkland that then can't be maintained at a level of service on that parameter. So we're balancing a lot of things here. Just want folks to understand.
Absolutely.
The other thing we're measuring or balancing is the public's expectation. What do they expect of the county in relation to parks and trails? What's their expectation? If we have 50 people coming and say we want A and B, I bet we'd probably be moving towards A and B, whatever that is, but managing their expectations as well within our means.
Right. Well, and I think that key point of within our means, I think it's extremely important for us. I mean, certainly when we look across even just the country, we have to be able to maintain what we have. And so if we just keep acquiring and we can't maintain it's no longer really an asset. It just becomes more of a liability. And so we want to be mindful of that. And so that is what we've taken into consideration and we're proposing.
Good point. So you have the thumbs up from,
Yep.
or did you have the thumbs up, Ty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards, just to set a public hearing?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So let's move on to the impact fees then.
Okay. I am going to one moment.
Is that page 88?
I think it is, yeah. Starting with GMA impact fees.
Bear with me as I
That's fine. Hurry up and take your time.
Okay. Are you able to see a slide that reads at the top, proposed updated park fees rate schedule? Okay.
Jennifer,
does it say?
if you can blow it up as a slideshow, that will be a better resolution.
Yes, I have been trying to do that, but when I do that, I am unable to find the share screen button at the top. So I will
Well,
attempt.
that's on page 99, isn't it?
I'm looking to see. Oh, there we go. Yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
1 second. I'll see if I can.
I don't think you need to blow it up, is what I'm saying, I guess. If we all have a copy of it.
Can you see it larger now?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Third time's a charm. Okay. So again, this is a follow-up briefing to the June 10th briefing that we had on impact fees. And specifically what you're looking at right now is our current park impact fees down at the bottom, single family, multifamily, mobile home. That's what we currently are charging, $1,339 for a single family. The adjusted park impact fee rates per unit based off of the study that was done for single family, it's a slight increase, proposed increase of $1,515.46. It's actually a reduction for multifamily and another slight increase for mobile homes. And so really what we wanted to know, what we had questions of the board is there any additional information that you need from us in terms of the study that was done and the current situation that we're in to help you make an informed decision of how you would like to move forward?
Can you go to the next slide, number 100?
Oh boy. Is that it? Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh, please. Sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say this one was, I have notes from the last briefing. This one was relevant to me because whereas with traffic impact fees, we are kind of out in front a little bit of neighboring jurisdictions. With parks, we're behind. And even with the update, we're still a factor of 2 or more behind. So to me, they're not the same. There's sort of different considerations, traffic versus park. And this slide was instructive for me.
Is Olympia the only one, Jennifer, that has an impact, a parks district?
Tumwater has also a parks district.
Does Lacey does not?
Lacey, the citizens did the pass.
Okay, thank you.
You know, being people are quiet, I guess I'll break that.
Go ahead.
From my perspective, for all the reasons that we talked about from an economic standpoint, about not making any adjustments for our earlier meeting, I'm inclined, I feel the same way, to not make any increases in this at this point in time. I mean, I know you guys are doing a good job. You got a lot of good stuff here, but right now is not the time to do it, in my estimation.
Ty, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I support this increase. I disagree. I agreed with the master builders on traffic, but I don't agree with them on this one because, we're still by a factor of 2 lower than neighboring jurisdictions. We're in a position where we're lowering our level of service with regard to our parks. If we have a disparate scheme, which we're still going to have, you incentivize rural development in a way that goes directly against our comprehensive plan policies, and I think that's a problem. You have they talk about you can't. I think that we're very close, from my estimation, to getting a legislative change on our ability to use impact fees for maintenance and operation. I know that was something we had on our legislative agenda. We had support of our local delegation. We pulled it off because of some other reasons, but we had strong support from our local delegation. And also the master builders talked about the letter talked about that, you can't, I'm trying to remember what they said, something about you can't, essentially people are using parks from outside the direct neighborhood. But as I understood, and Jason can probably answer this, as my understood is the methodology incorporated in its calculation that portion of the infrastructure that was connected to the new development. It's sort of, my understanding is it accounted for the fact that not 100% of the use of a park is geared to new development. So I don't think that argument holds water. And Jason, tell me if I'm wrong on that.
You're absolutely correct. Legally, you can't use 100% of impact fees to pay for any one project, regardless. And then your staff as subject matter experts on what these projects actually are went through and said, this much of this project is related to growth. And that is an appendix in the study itself showing exactly how much was allocated for each project.
So based on that, number one, based on the fact that this is a very modest proposal, number two, and the fact that number three, our park impact fees are still well behind other jurisdictions, I'm supporting this one.
Commissioners, if I may, this is Karen. I just want to point out that one of the fees, the multifamily fee, if you chose not to change rates, still would require a rate change because our current fee is higher than the fee that is proposed under the updated rates. So I would not think we'd want to be in a position that charging a higher fee in one area than is supported by the current rate schedule or the rate study.
How big a difference is that, Karen?
It's about a $56 difference. Okay. It's the middle multifamily.
I got 57, yeah, 56, okay.
Yeah.
Does that adjustment take a public hearing to make that change?
Well, technically you don't need to have a public hearing to pass an ordinance for rates, but generally our practice has been that we would have one.
Like the transportation impact doesn't take a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
But our general approach has been that we would.
I really value our parks and trails. I mean, I really, really do. But I'm willing to pay the increase. But I'm just dubious at this point in time with people losing jobs still, even though it's a modest increase. Everything, when you accumulate a modest increase here and a modest increase there and a modest increase here, all fees are going up. It all adds up to when people lose their jobs and lose a business and whatnot. It's still even $56 a month is maybe a tank and a half of gas or some food. So I want to support our parks in the best way. So even if we were to propose some type of this, the adjusted park impact per unit that you have presented here on page 99, I'm not inclined to raise that anytime immediately soon.
I'm with you.
But we've got to support Jennifer and Carrie and et al. And got to support the maintenance and the levels of service for our parks and meet the public's expectations, especially when we open up the parks. Hey, do we have to have do we have bathrooms? Can we have the capacity? I mean, all those things cost money. So I want to support it, but I would look at maybe some a rate increase, but then, like I just said, put it off sometime in the near future. Could be January. It could be sometime down, just delayed. But I support the increase.
You do support it?
I support an increase if we delay it sometime in the future.
Okay.
So let me see if I understand, Commissioner Hutchins. You support the increase, the revised fees, but the legislative action, you want to start implementing it later on, or you want to delay this decision to later? Please clarify.
Yes, I do. But I'm just one of three.
No, I want to delay the decision until later, till we see what reality we're dealing with in our economic situation.
So that's what I'm trying to clarify, the board's direction. Commissioner Minzer clearly stated he's in support of the proposal.
But I'm willing to discuss delay of implementation.
So that's what I'm trying to understand. What is the at least the majority of the board's direction on this?
Well, it sounds like the majority of the board supports the increase, but we just need to decide when to implement that increase.
Yeah.
What's your proposal, Commissioner Hutchins?
Well, I was thinking 6 months, January.
That's fine.
All right.
But how are you on that, Gary?
I'm not in favor of supporting any increase at this point in time. I would reconsider everything, in 6 months or something, but I just don't know where we're headed, and I'm getting conflicting information whether the sky is falling or not. So I'm just not sure, and I don't think that's the time to make the decision when you're not sure.
You have a proposed implementation then?
Well, I would say revisit this in 6 months and see what our economic situation looks like. Have we reduced regulatory restrictions so people can actually start building and we could take advantage of this rate increase? There's a lot of things that come into play, but I'm not ready to vote on an increase.
So Romero, we can't bifurcate this, can we? Where hey, let's vote on, we support the increase, but we don't know when. Or does it have to be done at one time?
No, because, and then the next conversation is, if the majority of the board supports this proposal, the conversation is, would you like to have a public hearing on the proposed rates? Then the staff will bring an AIS for you to set a public hearing, and after the public hearing, on the ordinance that you may approve supporting these rates, that's when you add the date of implementation.
Okay, so I'm gonna offer this then. Can we have this revisited then in December or January? The whole kit and caboodle? Because if we get dialed back because of COVID, or if there's a surge, we don't get dialed back, but there's maybe some further restrictions, and now we have September, October in the flu season, and hospitals collapse, and the worst case scenario, we'd probably be in a better position to decide in December or January which direction to take, whether the sky is falling or whether, hey, wow, this really worked out great for us. Let's do something.
I'll go along with Commissioner Hutchins on that regard.
So procedurally, what we've been asked to do is when we have potential revenue increased items, is to hold a public hearing. And this is where I will lean on Robin Campbell to talk about the kind of actual steps. But we've been asked to do request an AIS for public hearings and to hold them. We were proposing in November, because my understanding was the county wanted to have all of the revenue generating items all together in the same day for public hearings.
So we are required by state law to have a hearing on revenues that support the budget in November. And so our procedure has been, whenever we have a proposal for changes in fees or rates or any other type of revenue, that we combine those into the one legal hearing that you must hold on revenue that supports the budget.
So with that information, if we were to adopt, it's not adopt, but say yes, go ahead with the public hearing for this, it would be scheduled for sometime in the future, but we need to decide in November. Is that what I'm hearing? We have to decide in November so it's incorporated into the budget?
There's also one other scheduling piece to this. Sorry, just to keep adding on, but not only is this a financial regulation, but this is also considered to be a development regulation under the WAC, which means it needs to go before the Department of Commerce for review, and they require 60 days. So if you're thinking of implementing this by January 1st, then it would need to go to them 60 days before that. You can ask for an expedited review, and they do typically grant it, I especially think now, for 30 days. But it would be better not to set yourself up that you absolutely need that. So as far as for a development regulation, you might want to just move 60 days back at least to consider this, excuse me.
Okay, but what I'm also hearing though is, and I'm not under any timeline or deadline by January 1 to implement this, but if it were to go through Commerce, go through all the hearing, all that, rigmarole, is there a time where when would this be implemented? If everybody said yes, 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 and we get to January, can we say, oh, you know what, we changed our mind. It's turning into a jungle out here. We don't want to do it now. We can still change our mind, couldn't we? Even if Commerce said, yeah, you're good to go, we can say, we changed our mind.
Could.
I'm sorry, Robin?
I said that is your prerogative as the board.
I'm going to step out because I have a Zoom meeting in about 40 seconds. So I am just going to say that I'm opposed to doing anything, and we can review this again in January.
Jason, just a quick question. Is it the post that goes to Commerce, or is it the impact fees?
It's the impact fee.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Menser, do you want to weigh in on this?
I'd like to I would like to approve the increase. I am happy to lay it for 6 months, maybe even 12 months, but I'd like to have the issue settled. I'm not interested in just kind of punting it down the road 6 months, and that's where I'm at. But it sounds like there's a lot of procedural stuff, and we could from what I'm hearing, we could set this up to move forward, and we'd still have, several months that Commissioner Edwards wants to kind of assess where the economy's headed and stuff, because, we could lay this out today in a way that, kind of unfolds over the course of the rest of the year.
Well, then I will weigh in as well. I support the increase. And my only issue is when to do it. But if we have several months that we've got to go through process of public hearing and then Commerce and such, we're talking about late fall anyway, almost into winter. And then we can decide yes, or we can pull the plug on it if it's really upside down and the wrong decision. Because I don't want to be irresponsible either way, of burdening the folks, limiting folks building, and or degrading our parks any further than, and the levels of service degrading further than we need to. So is that the direction? You have two commissioners saying, go ahead with the increase and start the process, but nothing's going to happen within the next 6 months anyway for implementation.
Okay.
Robin?
I do have again, a procedural question, because the department is in the process right now of entering information for next year's budget into the budget system, and that has to be completed by August 4th. So should we assume an increase next year, which you can change later, or not assume an increase at this time that would take effect next year? And if you should change your mind, you could add it in later.
Well, a clarifying question, Robin, is if we said, yeah, go ahead and factor it in as an assumption, would it be for the entire year then, even though we decide in January, we're going to put off another 6 months?
That is what I'm asking. When would you like us to assume at this point in time
Oh, okay.
Fees would begin?
And if we said January, and then we wait 6 months, you have to redact or take out 6 months of
We can just
revenue.
reduce the revenue when it comes time to pass the budget. But the law requires that any assumed revenue is entered by, I think it's August 10th.
So what happens if we don't assume then? And I know that's an option because you offered that. If we don't assume, but then it happens in February, March, or April, it's just added revenue.
Yeah, you could add it in later.
Okay.
Could also be, Robin, can be handled by a proviso on that particular item.
Yeah, we could add a proviso.
So I think there is a lot of elements, a lot of tools that commissioners can use while you are looking all the budget. But my suggestion will be, at this point, to enter as a new revenue beginning on January 1st, 2000, because that is going to be part of overall the conversation you need to have when you look at the budget. So increasing the revenue associated with the rate increases is going to be essential in a couple of occasions when you hold the public hearing on revenue, and also when you make the final decisions. At that point is whether you can exercise a proviso, or you can exercise that perhaps the revenue may not materialize beginning in June of next year. So there's a lot of touch points that you have when you look at the budget itself. But at this point, my suggestion for the board will be to direct the department to go ahead and include all that revenue as part of the upcoming August 4th deadline.
And I agree with that from a perspective of it kind of can be predictable and you want to plan for it, but also makes the budget look healthier than it might be. So on the other hand, I'm thinking, why fake it? Let's just say, let's presume nothing's going to happen. And then when it does happen, whoa, look at this.
It's better to put it in and take it out later than to not address it and have not had the appropriate hearings.
But the same thing applies for transportation as well. Those traffic impact fees, we have the same.
Right, but that traffic impact fees is, I think we just went through that. Is a little more.
No, well, I just mean procedurally though. It's this.
Right.
We're dealing with this.
Yeah.
And that has to go through commerce as well?
Sorry, I was going to say the good news is when you're looking at the budget is the expenditures are based on prior impact fees that have been collected. So if that makes sense, right? So when we're looking at the expenditures out of the transportation or the parks impact fee fund, we're actually spending balance that we have from prior years. So.
Okay. Well, I have another question, a clarifying question for Robin. Why is it better to build it in and take it out than to not plan on it? And wow, look at this. Now we're going to add it.
Because you're providing an opportunity for the public to review the amounts, to see what the plan is and to weigh in on that, rather than having nothing there. So it's a more transparent process. If you're actually thinking about doing it, it's more transparent to have it there than not.
Okay. That makes sense.
And Commissioner, all the assumptions, all the additional revenue associated with this revised increases is all draft. It's all draft until December when the board takes an action on the budget.
And I'll just say that, you know, even though I'm supporting this, if we're in a devastating economic situation in late fall, I will not hesitate to delay implementation for a year or whatever. I mean, that seems totally reasonable to me, but building it in at this point also seems reasonable.
And that's where I am. And so that what I'm hearing is that's a good way to go then, to move forward with it as a draft. Would that be a proviso then?
That's
I guess.
Certainly make it a proviso, yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm happy with that then.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the end result? My Zoom meeting is being tied up by your server here.
Currently, we're hugging the Zoom.
So then we will be moving forward with an AIS for a public hearing in November.
But the AIS is part of the overall budget, public hearing, and revenue. So
Correct.
we're putting the details of it. So since Commissioner Edwards just came in, I'd just like to give him a heads up what the majority of the board decided. The majority of the board decided in supporting the new park impact fees, and also the majority of the board instructed the department to include that as part of the draft budget they will be considering later in the fall, and as part of the additional revenue. The discussion was the board will have many check-in points in the fall to whether you would like to continue with this fee increase, or you like to curtail back. So there's a lot of options. At this point, this is what you're just moving forward on the concept.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm noted as voting against.
Yeah, I have you as a no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want Commissioner Edwards he missed the benefit of the conversation that even though we move forward, it will come as a draft to us in the fall. And as Romero just said, we can scale it back, we can move forward, or if there's a devastating economic factor that we can't predict, we can just say we're done with it and it's gone.
Right.
But it gives us something to plan towards, but we can stop it anyway down the road as long as we have that proviso in there as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, that concludes this meeting. Unless there was something else. Any wrap up, Romero?
No, thank you. Appreciate it. I think we're running a little late and the Zoom meeting needs to be occupied.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.